U.S. government securities. They also act as a bank for banks by providing key financial services. Government securities. They also act as a bank for banks by providing key financial services. the Fed.
Good day. It's an honor, a true honor, to be back at the Federal Reserve and to take up this duty at a time of such consequence. I've been especially heartened by the warm welcome of old friends and new colleagues both. And I've listened closely to my fellow FOMC members, heard a lot of new ideas, new thinking, and genuine interest in moving the Fed forward. This week's FOMC meeting exemplified the very best of the Fed's traditions: rigorous debate, open-mindedness, commitment to mission, responsibility, and accountability for performance. In this business, they all add up to one thing: getting monetary policy right, or as near to it as we can do. That is our North Star. My colleagues and I are here to serve our legislative remit, which you've heard us say before: price stability and maximum employment. And these objectives guided our business in the meeting just concluded. As you saw a few moments ago, the committee decided to maintain the target range for the Fed funds rate at 3.5% to 3.75% in support of the Fed's dual mandate. The committee also reaffirmed its policy of maintaining ample reserves in the banking system. Economic activity is expanding at a solid pace, despite elevated uncertainty that owes in part to the conflict in the Middle East. Productivity growth and capital investment both strong. Job gains have kept pace with the workforce, and the unemployment rate has changed little. We recognize that inflation has been running well ahead of the Fed's long-stated inflation goal of 2%. That's been going on for more than 5 years. Persistently high prices are a burden for the American people. But the recent past need not be prologue. I am pleased to report that members of the FOMC are unambiguous and unanimous. This committee will deliver price stability. At any institution, a change in leadership is a natural and timely opportunity to reaffirm its mission, to review current practices, and to consider whether those practices best meet our objectives. My Fed colleagues and I will be working in close collaboration to ask what changes might improve the conduct of monetary policy. On that score, you might have already noticed something: a difference in today's policy statement. It's a bit shorter, a bit simpler, and it dispenses with some older language. That statement just gives you the facts as best we can judge it. Absent also is so-called forward guidance, which we agreed was not well suited to the current policy conjuncture. This afternoon, you also received the usual summary of economic projections. It's been the practice of this committee for participants to submit these projections, and I have encouraged my colleagues to continue to do so. I, however, have refrained from offering any projections of my own, consistent with my long-held views on the SEP, at least as currently structured. In the median projections, real GDP rises at 2.2% this year, 2.3% next year, and total PC inflation runs at 3.6% this year, 2.3% next year. The unemployment rate stands at about 4.3%. The median participant judges that the appropriate federal funds rate to be at 3.8% at the end of this year and 3.6% at the end of next. Let me turn now to a few words on a key initiative that we're announcing today. I'm appointing a task force in each of 5 areas that are central to the broad conduct of monetary policy. First, Fed communications. Second, the Fed's balance sheet. Third, our use and reliance on existing data sources. Fourth, productivity and jobs in an era of transformation. And last, the Fed's inflation frameworks. These subjects are timely, consequential, and in my view, worthy of a fresh look. My colleagues and I discussed them with energy and purpose over the last couple of days. For each of these independent task forces, I'm enlisting some of the very best minds, both inside and outside the economics profession. They will be supported by subject matter specialists from our superb Fed staff. And they'll have a straightforward charge. Start with first principles. Ask hard questions. Examine current practice. Consider alternatives. And ultimately, propose next steps for policymaker consideration. Since last summer, my colleagues discussed possible improvements in the form and function of Fed communications. This new task force will build on that effort, and I expect propose some well-considered changes, including to the SEP I mentioned a few moments ago. The second task force, the one on balance sheet policy, will review the benefits and risks of the current ample reserves regime and the composition of the Fed's balance sheet. They will assess alternative frameworks for the conduct and operation of monetary policy. The third task force, the one on data, will evaluate new information sources and consider methodological changes to improve data gathering, with the aim of giving policymakers more accurate, relevant, contemporaneous, and perhaps most important, actionable information on the state of our economy. Fourth, the task force on productivity and jobs. It'll survey the pace, the reach, the economic impact of new general purpose technologies, including AI, and explore the implications for the Fed in pursuit of our employment and inflation mandates. The last task force, the one on inflation frameworks, that'll examine the drivers of inflation, first principles, and weigh the full range of ideas for delivering price stability in a changing economy. You'll hear quite a bit more about these task forces and this overall initiative in the coming weeks. Enough for now to make a simple statement. Each task force will serve an objective shared by everyone in the system, shared by everyone around that table that I sat with over the last couple of days. A Federal Reserve that is clear-eyed about its mission, fit for purpose, and focused on the future. And with that, I appreciate your attention. I'm happy to take your questions.
Howard Schneider.
Hi, Chairman Howard Schneider with Reuters. Good to see you again, and welcome back. This is a lot to be putting in motion so fast. What is the timeline you have in mind for each of these?
So I think it'll depend on the task force. It also depends on the urgency in which we need clear answers. My expectation, I'm still in the business of recruiting and finalizing them, my expectation is the task forces will begin work in the next couple of weeks, and we'll start to get some more information from them, some more framing of how they see things starting in the fall end, hopefully most, if not all of them, concluding by year end.
And just specifically on the inflation framework, you talk about first principles. Does this include a review of the 2% target itself? You've mentioned that things to the right of the decimal point don't matter. Should this be starting from a premise that 2% as a point estimate is too strict?
Let me break that into two pieces. First, on the inflation framework review, their remit is what are the drivers of inflation? What's the Fed's responsibility for inflation? In part, how do we measure inflation? But that'll overlap with my data group. On the 2% inflation objective, that is the Federal Reserve's long-held objective of 2%. You've heard me say before, I tend to focus on the left of the decimal point. Well, the 2 is the left of the decimal point. For now, 0 is to the right. I see no reason until we have reestablished our commitment and ability to deliver on the 2% inflation objective to revisit that. So that'll be outside the scope of what we're taking on.
Thank you so much. Colby Smith with the New York Times. You've in the past said that inflation is a choice, and in the policy statement, it includes this pledge to deliver price stability, as you've reiterated today. But looking at the SEP, the bulk of your colleagues expect core PCE to run around 3.3% by year end, and for the 2%, inflation target not to be reached until 2028. So I'm curious how patient you think the Fed can afford to be at this juncture in terms of waiting for one-time inflation waves to wash through and for underlying inflation to step down after so many years of inflation running above target, and under what circumstances you would support the Fed taking some action and raising rates.
Sure. So quite a bit there. Let me try to break that into pieces. First, we have the capability and commitment to deliver on our price stability objective of 2%. That's exactly what we're going to do. In the Fed's review of its strategy over the last any number of years, in January, the Fed, including the strategy that we're still bound by, the Fed statement says that inflation is primarily determined by monetary policy. You bet it is. I've said for years inflation is a choice. You bet it is. And today I'm announcing that this committee unambiguously and unanimously have decided we are going to deliver on that. The rest of your questions sounded like an encouragement for me to give forward guidance. We've dropped forward guidance. Some along the committee, I think, dropped it, I suspect, from our discussion the last couple of days, because they said at this moment in time, it doesn't feel as though providing forward guidance is right. Others have, I'd say, different views and think as a general proposition, forward guidance isn't the business we should be in. But that'll be taken up by the Task Force on Communications and my policymaker colleagues. We're going to listen hard to what the experts say and make our own decision. But I can't give any forward guidance about what we're going to do next. The good news is we'll be meeting in 6 weeks.
So just following up, I guess, on the current policy settings, then, I am curious how restrictive you think things are at the current moment, given the flow of data that we've seen and, forecasts that are coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, I've heard characterizations both inside and the Fed about that. I'll give you my own. It's uneven. If I look at the housing markets as one example, Fed policy isn't the single determinant of the state of the housing market. But broadly, I would say Fed policy appears to be somewhat restrictive. I would have a hard time managing to say those words if I were to see what's happening in financial markets. So I'd say it's uneven. That's perhaps a function of different transmission mechanisms of monetary policy, whether monetary policy is coming from our interest rate tool or our balance sheet tool. But the good news, we have a task force on that too, and the balance sheet task force will be looking more at that subject.
You said you don't like forward guidance. You dropped it from the statement this time. But with the dot plot, 9 members suggested that they want a rate increase by the end of the year. And the markets have taken that as forward guidance. So what does this mean in terms of how you guide the markets and in terms of what the dot plot's future is?
I'm going to have to give you the same answer I gave to Ms. Smith. We've got a task force for that. I'll give you a little bit more. I reviewed the dot plots, and when I saw the submissions, I noted that all the submissions were coming in with pencils, those kind with the big erasers. That's to say that I think my colleagues around the table, when they submitted their dots, understand the world is changing quite quickly. And they didn't feel bound by them 6 weeks from now or 6 days from now in the event that their circumstances change. I'll note a couple other things. What I heard around the table was, as they submitted their modal forecasts, to be clear, weren't this was more likely than not. This was more likely than their other scenarios. So I didn't hear tons of conviction. What I heard was the kind of humility that I think we should have. I did not submit a dot. For me, it's not helpful in the conduct of policy. I suspect by year end, as I mentioned in my opening statements, there'll be a review about communications broadly, press conferences, dots, meetings and the like, transcripts, minutes. This will be part of that. I don't want to prejudge the outcomes there, but I'm pretty open-minded about what they could be. And I was just incredibly impressed over the last couple of days. My colleagues over the last 2 days, and frankly, over the first 3 weeks I've been here, they've been very open about changes. Change isn't easy. Change is filled with risk. But our number one goal is to get monetary policy right. The way to get monetary policy right is to deliver on the remit that Congress gave us, to deliver on price stability, and there was no disagreement on any of those points.
At the risk of possibly getting the same answer about task forces, communications, what is your feeling about these news conferences? Are you going to continue one after every meeting? Do you find them useful? What is the future for the way Kevin Warsh will communicate?
Well, this one's probably got another 15 or 20 minutes in it, so I don't want to prejudge the outcome. Press conferences can be a very useful way to communicate with households, businesses, and more broadly through using the likes of you. I had a great old mentor named George Schultz, and his mantra was press conferences are useful, but when you have one, you want to make sure you have something important to say. Today, I think we had something important to say about our commitment to deliver on price stability, our commitment to rethink practices with an eye of moving the Fed forward, and to give you and the American people a sense that these aren't idle thoughts, these are concrete thoughts, that we're going to seek out the best minds, both the best thinking inside of the Federal Reserve and the best people I know in business and economics and the academy and technology and the rest, to share their views. That's what we're going to be doing here, the pursuit of truth. I think we're going to come up with some new and interesting things. We made some changes today. I expect more changes to come. And some of those might well be worthy of a press conference.
Chris Rugaber.
Hi, Chris Rugaber at Associated Press. Thanks for taking our questions. Could you give us a sense of how you see inflation more in the long term? I know you may not want to comment on the ups and downs, but is this mainly driven by energy prices in the Iran war at this point, or do you have any concerns about underlying inflation pressures in the economy? Thank you.
So I can't do much better than the committee just did, so let me restate it. Inflation remains elevated relative to the committee's 2% goal, in part reflecting supply shocks that have driven price increases in certain sectors, including energy. The paragraph goes on to say, but to be clear, the Fed will deliver price stability. My own judgment is the committee spent quite a bit of time, not just in 2 days, but over iterations of a couple of weeks. That's what we're prepared to say about inflation, but the commitment to deliver is strong, unanimous, and unambiguous. And that's, I think, an important message. We've missed for 5 years, and we're going to fix that.
Well, great. And then just on the data task force and everything else, I mean, generally speaking, I think people feel the Fed looks at everything already. Certainly that was the sense from before. Is there data that you feel is not given enough weight? I mean, you mentioned the trimmed the mean in the past, but again, that's well known to certainly most Fed members. So what is that task force looking at, and what might be I mean, I know you don't want to prejudge the outcome, but are there examples of data that you expect might be given more weight? Thank you.
So you're answering my question, so let me say I don't want to prejudge the outcome. I also don't want to say too much about what they're going to do because I still have a phone call or two to make before I've nailed down the people that are doing that. I'm interested in what the outside experts' view is on the subject. I'll say this generally. Most of the data that central bankers and other government officials in the United States consume come with old-fashioned survey methods, national accounts of what the U.S. economy looks like that looks very little like the U.S. economy in 2026. Survey methods that don't have response rates that we need, asking questions that might have been quite applicable a generation ago that are less applicable now. So even inside of official statistics, I would be open-minded if the task force and our own best thinking had recommendations how those official statistics can be brought up to a standard of our time using new analytic methods. I'd also say this, almost every private company CEO that's running his or her business are doing so with real-time information that isn't subject to much revision, that is telling them what just happened at that very moment. As you know, there are normal, long and variable lags in the conduct of monetary policy. What we're really interested in is what's happening right now. What we're less interested in is echoes of history. And you're hearing from my answer that some of the data that we receive that we're waiting on, the first Friday after the month, the payroll index or something else, that might be an echo of history that's quite useful on its third revision. We need to take those error bounds down because we have to make hard decisions in real time. I'm really open-minded that there is a lot of new data sources that we can learn from the private sector, from reforms in the official sector, and new analytic techniques that are far more refined than asking a simple question about whether something was core or non-core.
Edward.
Thanks. Welcome, Mr. Chairman. Edward Lawrence with Fox Business. So if you don't give a lot of ongoing forward guidance, won't the markets have more volatility, and shouldn't Americans have more access into what you're thinking going forward?
So I think financial markets perform best when they react to incoming data. I think the financial markets work less efficiently when they ask a question, how will the Federal Reserve react to that incoming information? The more that markets are paying attention to what's happening in the real economy, deciding what's good data and what's less good data, the more financial markets can price what they believe is the most likely and what are the tail risks. Financial market prices are probably the most important source of information to guide central bankers. But when all the financial markets are doing is reflecting back what we've said, then we're taking the most important source of information and we're being blind to it. I'd like us to create a system where those blinders come off, where markets are following data that they efficiently think is reliable, and they'll be watching data, we'll be watching data, they'll come with better information through market prices to us, we can make more informed decisions, with ultimately the goal that I said at the outset, deliver on the price stability objective that Congress told us to do, and that we've got to get in the business of doing.
Yeah, if I could take you in the meeting a little bit. This is your first meeting. The board members seem fairly hawkish when you listen to, in general, when you listen to what they're saying. Was there any discussion of a rate cut going forward today?
There was one proposal on the table. There was no discussion of any other proposals. The discussion on that proposal, I would say, was quite limited. The group was unanimous and unambiguous on it. It has been the practice of this central bank and others to have a range of alternatives. Today we had one. I thought it furthered discussion, deepened it, and made it clear what we needed to do and how we needed to deliver. I wouldn't prejudge what happens in the future, but there was only one big subject for us. We took it on. We had a good family fight on it for a couple of days, and we ended up, I think, in a better place.
Claire.
Thanks a lot, Claire Jones, Financial Times. Coming to this blind, reading this very nice short statement that I think we've all appreciated in the room, one might wonder why you didn't raise rates today, considering what you're saying here about the risks to U.S. inflation and your mandate. I guess, why not, and what would you need to see in order to get to that place? And secondly, on your task forces, are there any best practices at other central banks that you'd consider looking at? Thank you.
Yeah. I'm glad they're in the practice of giving you two questions, because my answer to your first question was going to be very curt. I've got nothing more to say than the statement itself. And to the point of the question I got before, market reactions to what we say unfiltered, I think, is more helpful than having delivered a statement, me then improvising further upon it. Best practices of task forces. This is a subject I've thought some about. I've been on a task force or two in my life. Best practice, find the best minds. Ensure that the task forces have a range of people, both by backgrounds and predispositions, so they too can have a bit of a family fight. Make sure when you establish a task force that the group that's going to be the recipient of the information feels as though they've got some equities in it too. That's why we're looking for, haven't done the final roll call, some of the most significant talent we have in the building and across the reserve banks on each of these, and in some sense seconding them to this group for a period of some number of months, so that the leaders of the task force know what the most analytical central bank in the world thinks about that. They can reflect on it. And a final best practice, we're not outsourcing decisions to anybody. Administrations past and present, reserve banks have chosen a group of 19 people around the table. These will be our decisions. We can agree to some of the recommendations, disagree with others, have a good family fight about it. But what comes from them will, I hope and believe, make the discussion we have internally better, stronger, more of a dialectic, so that we can finally deliver on that price stability objective.
Just a quick follow-up on your markets point. If you look at 2-year yields, they're really suggesting that markets think more tightening is needed. Would that be your read on what the 2-year yield is saying as well?
We were in such a good place. This is why we don't do third questions, I presume. I'm not going to offer any commentary on market reaction over the last 30 or 60 minutes. What we've given markets is a new chapter for the central bank, some fresh thinking. What we've given markets and households and businesses, I think, is a commitment to ask ourselves hard questions such that we can deliver on the promises that we've made before. This is a lot of change for financial markets to digest. I wouldn't be particularly intrigued by how they react in the first several minutes or even first several days. What I think is most important is that financial markets, and at least as important, households and businesses know that this central bank will deliver on price stability.
Brian.
Hi there, Chairman Warsh. Brian Chung with NBC News. Thank you for taking our questions. So when you say that we've dropped forward guidance for the layperson, that might sound like the Fed's going to say less or offer less insight into where their borrowing costs might go. So for the person that maybe you might run into at the grocery store, where the price tags are rising at a faster pace than their wages at the moment, how would you explain it to them? I don't know if task force might be the answer there, but how would you kind of communicate this era, this chapter of the Fed?
If I told somebody in the milk aisle that I had a task force for that, I think that would be doing a very poor job, so I appreciate it. If I saw somebody in the grocery store, what I would say to them is that we cannot have a very significant effect on particular prices. The price of oil in the markets today, or even the price of a dozen eggs, that does not have first-order consequences to what we're doing. But we do have a really important job there, and it's to make sure that those changes in oil or beef or eggs or milk don't broaden in the economy, don't have second and third-order effects. That's our job, that's our commitment, that's our capability, and we're going to deliver on it.
And then is the Fed's relationship with the Treasury also under review? There was the normal breakfast meetings with the Treasury Secretary. Is that something you intend to continue doing? And have you had conversations with the President since you're swearing in?
So on the President, I don't have anything for you. With respect to the Treasury Secretary, he has been posting pictures of our breakfast, so I don't think I can deny that. The long tradition at the central bank is that the Fed chairman and the Treasury Secretary meet weekly. I think we've pulled off 3 of those so far. I believe he's overseas this week, so this will be the exception to the rule. I think they're very useful discussions. The central bank's objectives and our roles and responsibilities are quite delineated from the fiscal authorities. And in my view, monetary policy is independent in the conduct of what we do. But that doesn't mean we're not interested in what's happening with the fiscal authorities. The way I think about it is this central bank needs to have a wide lens, but a narrow remit. We need to be quite interested in what's happening in the world. I won't be breaking any news here to suggest I'm quite interested in what's happening in the Middle East. That does have some effect on our day job. It doesn't mean it's our responsibility, but I think we're going to keep a wide lens, and my meetings with Secretary Besson to this point have helped widen that aperture. So we're aware of things that could affect our day job, even if it isn't.
Steve Leisman, CNBC. Mr. Chair, thank you. Mr. Chairman, thank you for taking my question. You had said in the before you became chairman that you thought productivity was a reason why the Federal Reserve could lower interest rates. Do you still believe that to be the case?
So the committee had a discussion of productivity today. AI came up. The way I thought about it before and socialized with the group is that artificial intelligence, the latest generation of general purpose technology, is perhaps as important a change in the economy and business and households that we've had in my adult lifetime. It is filled with both a huge opportunity and with risks. I take both of those very seriously. You may have heard me say before that AI is shorthand perhaps for American ingenuity. That doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. That certainly doesn't mean it's not going to be disruptive. But over the long term, my conviction, and I heard quite a bit of support for this around the committee today, is the United States is a winner as we go down this. The United States is ultimately going to be better off in that. Now, to bring that back to the conduct of policy, timing, scale, speed, implications for output and employment, it's one of the things we have a task force to do.
If you don't mind, a follow-up from the other side, which is that when you look at the strong job growth that's out there, the elevated inflation, GDP seems to be going pretty good, and the stock market seems to be soaring. Do you look around this economy and see the funds rate being restrictive?
So that's your second question. I'm going to give the same answer that I gave before. I'd say as I think about the conduct of policy, what matters is what's the effect of policy. Not what do we say, but what happens. And the best way I can describe is it's uneven. I do see some restrictiveness in things like housing. It's hard to use those same words anywhere else. I'll just make one other point. You talked about one of our dual mandates on the employment side. I don't believe that we have a cruel choice. I don't share the view that was expressed a few generations ago that Federal Reserve chairmen show up at a podium like this and say, you got to choose. And you're going to have to decide whether you're willing to tolerate higher inflation to put more people at work. I don't believe in that. What I believe is if we do our job, we can make strong growth, low prices, and strong employment mutually compatible. And so what you heard from the committee today is we've got some work to do on the price stability front.
Nick.
Thank you. Nick Timmeros with the Wall Street Journal. Chairman Warsh, you've said repeatedly credibility is earned by delivering. If credibility requires delivering, the move would be to tighten or at least to threaten to. Now, you didn't do that today. Why not?
That judgment you expressed was not expressed by any of the 19 people around the table. We'll be meeting in 6 weeks. We'll take up the issue again.
And if I could ask about AI, the build-out is generating enormous demand right now, CapEx, data centers, power. The productivity payoff may be further out. So in your judgment today, is AI adding more to demand or to supply?
It's a good question. At the central bank and an economics profession, what we spend most of our time doing is counting demand. It's easier. We can see it, we can count it, we can check it, we can revise it. What we do, though, is we infer supply. You'll notice in the second paragraph of what one of your colleagues described as a very short statement, we have a sentence on the demand side and a sentence about the same length on the supply side. They're both important. Just because we can count one better than the other doesn't mean we're going to favor one more than the other. With respect to AI and the growth of data centers and infrastructure around it, we're counting the demand side, and it is no doubt showing up in GDP figures. We can be less certain when we infer the timing and extent of the growth in the supply side. It may well be an intuition the supply side is going to expand, but it'll take longer. I just describe it this way. There's a race between supply and demand. Milton Friedman says that the only thing we know about economics is that there's a supply line and a demand line they ultimately cross. When they cross and what are the implications for policy? The good news for you is we have a task force for that.
Andrew.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. It sounded like on the task force on data that you were looking at overhauling or completely overhauling the system of national accounts, the way the government minds the economy. Is that your ambition?
In a word, no. In a few words, much of this data gathering happens in other government agencies to which we owe a tremendous amount of respect, tremendous amount of deference. But if in the course of this we come up with recommendations, which Fed staff have already begun to develop, about things that they could be doing to help inform us as policymakers, we're not going to hesitate. Again, I don't want to try to delineate the four corners of the research of the task force on data, but I do think there will be a review of official statistics, and at least as important, a view of bringing the best practices from the private sector and new analytical tools made possible by AI, so we can forge these into a fabric that gives us better real-time information. So as I mentioned before, when we're making decisions that we'd say are real contemporaneous data, not data that we call contemporaneous, that's really an echo of history.
Okay, thanks. The other question I wanted to ask is related to the building renovations. Are you considering any changes to the renovations, the projects, just in light of the fact that they became kind of a political football in the last year?
I heard something about that. I don't think I'm breaking any news, but my view, when you show up at a new institution, you should go meet with the Inspector General, just as a matter of good practice. It's a practice that I hope to continue. I've had one meeting with the Inspector General, and he told me what I believe the world knows, which he'll be coming out with a report on the building and the building projects at some point later this summer. I'll be interested in reading the report. From my perspective, with a forward-looking glance, is there anything that we can be doing or should be doing from this moment until the completion of the project to do what we can to be good stewards of taxpayer money and make sure that we're delivering on the promises that we made? Some more work to do. You might not be surprised in the first few weeks. I've been somewhat preoccupied on other matters, but I promised to get to the full breadth of the Fed's tasks in the weeks ahead.
Victoria.
Hi, Victoria Guida with Politico. So I know that you did not submit a forecast, but you are the person who is authorized to speak on behalf of the FOMC. So I'm wondering if you could tell us in the SEP the increase in the expectations for inflation. Is that all because of the Iran war? What was the discussion around what the expectations for inflation being higher and also potentially growth being slower? So my read of what I heard in the room reflected, I must admit, in the SEPs, is half of my colleagues thought the policy rate, given all those developments, should be at this level or lower between now and year end, and the other half thought higher. That 19th voter was me, and I didn't submit one. There's a range of views on the questions of first and second round effects, no resolution or conviction, but we'll be meeting again in 6 weeks. I think we're going to know more then, and I think that my colleagues are very attentive to incoming developments between now and then. And can I just quick follow-up on the SEP? You said that you're still encouraging your fellow committee members to submit forecasts even if you're not doing it. So what do you think is the benefit of them doing it even if you don't?
That's the commitment that the FOMC made, and it's a commitment that I hope we live up to. Commitment we made was to deliver price stability. I expect us to live up to it. By the time we get to the end of this year, as I mentioned, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a new communications framework. There were some changes to the SEP. That's a committee discussion, a robust discussion. I think we'll have it. I believe we're going to come to a better mix of communications to deliver on what we promised, but I wouldn't want to prejudge what those are. But between now and then, I would continue to expect colleagues to submit their SEPs. Some of them, I think, believe that the practice is currently structured is okay, but I heard a lot of interest in real reform, generally about all these topics. You didn't ask it, but I'll answer. It was a pretty gracious couple of days, and it's been a pretty warm few weeks. The institution wants to figure out how we can do better. The institution's going back to first principles, and I'm encouraged that what we've done in the statement, what we're thinking about doing with respect to the SEP, that instinct towards a new chapter is a real one, and by the end of the year, I hope we can put some points on the board, both in form and in substance of delivering.
Go to Enda for the last question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Enda Curran, Bloomberg News. Could you guide us through, please, some of the principles that guide your own reaction function, and tell us a little bit about the kind of conditions that you think when the Fed should respond?
It's going to be a very unsatisfactory answer to the final question. The Federal Reserve has a lot of responsibilities, not just in monetary policy, but in supervision and regulation, consumer affairs and payments. My own view is our credibility comes from delivering on what we're saying we're going to do across everything we do. I've devoted more time in my first 3 weeks to monetary policy than all those things. But the more we deliver on our promises as good supervisors and good regulators, the more benefit we get, the more credibility enhancement we have in monetary policy. When we deliver on our price stability objectives, which we will, the American people will feel as though the hardships that they've been living through, in part because of inflation in the last 5 years, are in the rearview mirror, and that credibility will have dividends across what we do, and the institution will come to press conferences like this, always with an impetus to reform, always with an impetus to do better, but we're going to put some points on the board.
Mr. Chairman, strong labour data in recent months. How would you sum up the labour market right now? Do you see it as stable and as potentially a source of inflation? Thank you.
Yeah. So the committee, if I were to try to capture how the committee thought about it, the committee thought that the labor markets were stable. There were some people around the committee who thought that it was trending better than that. Trends matter more than data points. What's happening over 3 or 6 months matters more than any one data point, any one data release. And I'd say the jobs data has been moving in a good direction. If I heard one other thing around that subject over the course of the last couple of days, what I heard was that strong productivity-led growth is not something that we fear, but something we embrace. Thank you all very much.
It is great to be here with all of you to celebrate the incredible opportunities in rural America and to talk about strategies that are effective to do so. During my career, I've had the opportunity to work on issues affecting rural communities, especially access to capital. My time at the Federal Reserve has only deepened my appreciation for the opportunities and challenges of rural America as I've traveled over the past several years to rural communities. These communities share many challenges, and they also face distinct obstacles that require flexible solutions. What has stood out to me is the level of innovation and creativity behind many of those solutions. We can and should do more to elevate these examples, sharing what works and spreading ideas that can expand opportunity and support economic growth in rural America. Back in 2023, I had the opportunity to travel the Blues Trail in the Mississippi Delta from Jackson to Memphis. Along the way, I met with local leaders and financial institutions, some of whom are represented here today, to learn how once thriving rural railroad towns are adapting to both long-standing and emerging challenges. In Moorhead, Mississippi, where it's known as where the Southern crosses the Yellow Dog, I saw how a bank that had struggled to maintain a branch close to donate its building to a CDFI, preserving access to banking services for a community that needed it. In Clarksdale, Mississippi, I visited the Travelers Hotel, which was redeveloped using Newmarket's tax credits and is now contributing to the resurgence of that community, focused on blues tourism. I've also connected with the Delta Philanthropy Forum, a collaborative network of philanthropic partners investing in the region to deepen impact in sustainable ways. We discussed how philanthropy can serve as a critical bridge, providing capital for essential infrastructure like broadband and water systems, while also amplifying the voices of community members who are too often left out of local decision-making. On another trip, I met with leaders of banks serving members of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes on the Flathead Indian Reservation in western Montana. They spoke candidly about the challenges of providing affordable, accessible credit, particularly for home mortgages on trust lands. And I spoke with tribal leaders on the Blackfeet Reservation about the health and education challenges their communities were facing. Another visit when I met with farmers, ranchers, and community leaders in Nebraska, I heard about how shifts in labor availability, production costs, and technology are creating uncertainty for them, as well as for anchor institutions like hospitals and schools. And at the same time, I heard powerful examples of resilience and opportunity, from young entrepreneurs planting the seeds of innovation to farmers reaching new markets with their crops. My travels have shown me the great diversity across rural communities and reinforced the importance of adapting approaches rather than relying on a single narrative or a uniform community development policy. As this audience knows well, rural America is not one story, but many. Its economic foundations, geographical characteristics, and future trajectories differ not only from region to region, but often from one community to the next. Rural communities are highly diverse in ways that shape both their challenges and opportunities. Their economic outlooks are closely tied to local industries, which vary widely from oil and gas or manufacturing to agriculture. At the same time, the physical and spatial nature of rural areas differ across regions, with some places featuring closely connected, denser towns, and others defined by vast distances and limited access to urban centers, influencing everything from services to labor markets. The outlook for rural communities is far from uniform. While some struggle with workforce shortages, affordability issues, and institutional decline, others are adapting and thriving by diversifying their local economies, strengthening local leadership and institutions, and leveraging natural or cultural assets to attract residents and visitors alike. While each rural community is unique, these areas share a common reality. Vitality requires sustained effort, coordination, and intention. This is true whether the challenges stem from intrinsic issues, such as population trends, externally generated events, such as trade policy and geopolitical events, or longer-term trends, including such things as artificial intelligence. And I'll discuss each of these areas in turn. Research shows many communities face overlapping intrinsic structural challenges that complicate economic revitalization. A key constraint is population decline and aging. USDA data show that in 2023, rural counties had relatively low shares of prime age working adults, those aged 25 to 54, while residents 65 and over grew from 7.4 million in 2010 to 9.7 million in 2023. This imbalance leaves a smaller labor force supporting both younger and older populations. At the same time, migration, especially from foreign-born individuals, has become critical. Between 2020 and 2025, 47% of rural counties grew, but only 25% did so through increases in their local population, while over 86% relied on net migration. Rural areas also face the loss of key institutions like banks, hospitals, and sometimes even regional colleges. weakening access to capital, services, and economic stability. Often, communities that rely on a large employer or a single industry suffer or struggle when those employers and industries leave. Long-term employment declines in agriculture and manufacturing, driven by automation and globalization, have further reduced traditional job growth without consistently replacing them. Even though regional universities and community colleges can buffer these losses, many communities risk losing this support because of college closures and financial strains. Affordable housing shortages are also a major constraint. Studies show that over 1/3 of rural renters are cost-burdened, but homeownership can also be more affordable and attainable in some rural areas, with costs averaging 26% of median income versus 33% in metropolitan areas on average. Despite these challenges, there are numerous examples of resilience where rural communities have managed to overcome internal constraints. Before I turn to some externally generated challenges, let me just highlight a few success stories that I've heard about. And two of these success stories come from a recent Brookings Institution study on success in rural America. Like many small Mississippi Delta towns, DeWitt, Arkansas depended heavily on agriculture and a single major employer. When a shoe manufacturing plant closed, the town lost a significant share of its jobs, exposing the risks of economic concentration. Young people began to leave, investment slowed, and a broader set of decline set in. An early attempt to reverse this, a biofuel project built around a new crop and local processing, ultimately failed because of a poor fit with local conditions and external market challenges. However, that failure proved pivotal. It brought community members together, introduced new ways of thinking about economic development, and shifted the local mindset from resignation to experimentation. What followed was a fundamentally different approach to growth. Instead of attracting one large employer, DeWitt focused on building many small locally owned businesses, creating a more resilient and diversified economy. Leaders leaned into the town's natural assets, particularly its proximity to major hunting and fishing areas. This spurred growth in tourism, outdoor retail, and hospitality. Entrepreneurs began launching and adapting businesses based on real demand, supported by modest placemaking efforts and outside organizations that provided guidance without taking control. In the end, DeWitt's revitalization was not driven by a single project, but by a combination of mindset change, local ownership, economic diversification, and a willingness to adapt, turning a failed initiative into the foundation for long-term renewal. Similarly, Thomas and nearby Davis, West Virginia, are two former coal and timber towns that reinvented themselves as hubs for arts, culture, and outdoor recreation after a period of economic decline. As traditional extractive industries faded, new residents, artists, entrepreneurs, and small business owners helped rebuild the local economy around tourism, creative industries, and the natural landscape. A central player in that process, is often the case, was a community development financial institution, which acted as both a financial engine and connector across sectors. It provided small business loans, grants to entrepreneurs and artists, technical assistance, and support for local government capacity. Just as importantly, it aggregated and deployed funding from multiple federal sources, such as the U.S. Treasury's CDFI Fund, USDA lending programs, AmeriCorps, and the Appalachian Regional Commission. This is where public-private partnerships became critical. Federal dollars flowed through a locally embedded institution, which then partnered with municipalities, nonprofits, and private entrepreneurs to finance businesses, revitalize buildings, and address constraints like housing. The result was a network development model that enabled sustained growth, but trying to preserve community character. There are also impressive partnerships addressing the mortgage challenge I mentioned earlier in Indian country. Several CDFIs are helping deliver home mortgages on trust lands through a collaboration with USDA Rural Development. By combining culturally appropriate credit practices with character-based underwriting, in one region, local CDFIs were able to make 35 loans. That sounds small, but it represents a 400% increase in these types of loans in the communities that were affected. These examples highlight how rural communities deal with some of the intrinsic constraints discussed above, such as losing a major employer. But recent external events are also weighing heavily on rural areas. Rapidly changing trade policy and geopolitical events have affected rural communities dependent on foreign markets and foreign suppliers. International partners purchased roughly $175 billion in agricultural products in the United States in 2024, about 20% of all U.S. production. For certain commodities, reliance on international markets is particularly concentrated, such as soybeans, where more than 40% of U.S. production is ultimately exported. These relationships have been significantly disruptive by tariff policy. For example, according to the USDA, U.S. soybean exports to China during the first 3 quarters of 2025 were 38% lower than the same period in 2024. Higher U.S. tariffs, especially on steel and aluminum, impose further costs on farmers as they raise the price of agricultural machinery. Most recently, supplies and prices for fertilizer have been affected by conflict in the Middle East. More than a third of global exports of urea pass through the Strait of Hormuz, and the interruption has led to a sharp price increase in this important fertilizer, up about 55% since the beginning of this year. Prices for diesel, another important input for agricultural products, rose 50% over the past year. Rising fuel prices place significant pressure on cattle farmers in rural communities by increasing both direct and indirect production costs. Higher diesel prices raise expenses for operating equipment and transporting livestock, while also driving up the costs of key inputs like fertilizer and feed. Transportation costs across the beef supply chain also rise with fuel prices, contributing to higher consumer prices and squeezing returns for producers. Similarly, higher diesel prices are burdensome for dairy farmers because fuel is used at every stage of milk production and transport. Given rapidly changing circumstances, it is much too early to know the path for prices as events in the Middle East unfold. There are also several evolving economic trends that are likely to have enduring consequences for rural communities in the United States. Among them, the rise of data centers, the shift toward high-skill service sectors, and the growing use of artificial intelligence. AI may improve agricultural productivity. For example, research from the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City suggests that in some regions, more than half of agricultural employment could experience substantial productivity gain through the adoption of AI-enabled technologies. Other research finds that the rapid expansion of AI-driven data centers is increasingly concentrated in rural areas, bringing potential benefits such as tax revenue and infrastructure investment, but also significant trade-offs, including high energy and water demands, strain on local infrastructure, and uncertainty about the quantity and quality of long-term jobs created. At the same time, broader structural changes in the U.S. economy, particularly the long-term shift away from goods-producing industries towards knowledge-intensive service sectors, have disproportionately affected rural regions, which often lack the capital, connectivity, and workforce needed to fully participate in these higher skill industries, contributing to wider rural-urban economic gaps. At the Federal Reserve, supporting a healthy economy that works for all Americans is core to our mission. Monetary policy plays an important role in that effort. By promoting maximum employment and stable prices, monetary policy helps to create the conditions for businesses to invest, households to plan, and local economies, those in rural and urban communities, to grow and adapt. While monetary policy affects the whole country, understanding how these policies transmit through rural labor markets, rural small businesses, and rural agricultural economies contribute to broad-based inclusive growth. This responsibility is reflected in how the Federal Reserve System was designed. From the beginning, it has maintained a presence throughout the country, ensuring that the diverse experience and perspectives of people across America inform the decisions we make. At each Federal Reserve Bank, as well as the Board of Governors, dedicated community development teams work to ensure that those voices are heard and meaningfully integrated into our understanding of the economy. We actively seek to engage with as many communities as possible. And one of the important ways we do that is through our longstanding relationship with organizations working on the ground to build strong and stable communities. We listen closely through local sessions, through regional convenings like the Investing in Rural America series hosted by the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond, and through national gatherings such as the recent National Community Investment Conference held in Phoenix. At that conference, we brought together a wide range of experts and practitioners to explore innovative solutions and emerging opportunities, particularly in public-private partnerships that can expand community investment. We highlighted issues to rural economic growth, including supporting tribal and rural small business investment and catalyzing community development capital to support small towns and rural revitalization. In addition to these engagements, the Federal Reserve works to develop a deep, data-driven understanding of local economic conditions across the country. The Federal Reserve System conducts original research through tools such as the Survey of Household and Economics and Decision-Making, the Survey of Community Perspectives, and the Small Business Credit Survey. Just as importantly, we complement this quantitative work with qualitative research to better understand the why behind the data. We also recognize that a community's ability to attract and retain capital is essential to its vitality and its resilience. Within our broader framework, our implementation of the Community Reinvestment Act plays an important role in encouraging financial institutions to meet the needs of the communities they serve. Activities aimed at revitalizing or stabilizing distressed or underserved rural communities are a key part of CRA. Despite this progress, the needs of rural communities often exceed the resources available. And yet, what we consistently see, both in research and in communities across the country, is that when multiple sources of capital come together, when public, private, and philanthropic partners align, communities can truly thrive. That is why your work is so important. Thank you very much.
All right, our final session today, rather than organized as a panel around a specific topic, is an open comment session. We'll be hearing from a variety of speakers. We do ask that all speakers limit their comments to 2.5 minutes. I do have a colleague who is off camera who will be providing time checks as needed. My role is simply to announce the next speaker, and I beg your forgiveness if I mispronounce your name in advance. Our first commenter is Mr. William Michael Cunningham.
Good afternoon. My name is William Michael Cunningham, economist, founder of Creative Investment Research, and adjunct faculty member at Georgetown University. My comments today reflect my work as an analyst, amicus brief author, and editorial contributor, focusing on financial stability, capital access, and impact investments. Over several decades, I have concentrated on identifying systemic risk. Prior to the 2008 financial collapse, I submitted comments to federal banking regulators, the Federal Reserve, FDIC, OCC, and SEC, warning that weak oversight and excessive risk-taking were creating systemic vulnerabilities. In early 2008, I highlighted the closure of Douglas National Bank, a black-owned bank, as an early warning sign of growing instability. The global financial crisis that followed demonstrated the importance of strong supervisory institutions. I have continued this work through formal amicus briefs submitted to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit and the Second Circuit, documenting economic harm arising from market misconduct and weakened oversight. More recently, writing in the American Banker newspaper, I've warned that political pressure on central banks risks triggering hyperinflation, threatens economic stability, and reduces access to capital for minority-owned businesses. Financial markets trust independent regulatory institutions. When that independence is questioned, volatility increases and credit conditions tighten. This concern is not theoretical. We are in an environment where scandal-related governance concerns and extreme misconduct raise questions about executive branch credibility. When confidence in leadership weakens, confidence in policy and regulation weaken as well. The lesson is clear. Strong, independent, credible regulatory institutions are essential. For EGRPRA, this means preserving Federal Reserve independence, maintaining strong supervisory authority, protecting regulatory credibility and transparency, and ensuring stable access to capital for minority firms and for small firms. My regulatory comments, public interest amicus briefs, and editorials all point to the same conclusion. Weakening regulatory institutions increases systemic risks. Strengthening them supports stability, growth, and access to capital. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mr. Donald Cravens, Jr.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much. My name is Donald Cravens, Jr., President and CEO of the National Minority Supplier Development Council. I'm thankful to the Federal Reserve for holding this outreach hearing today and allowing for open comments. NMSDC connects more than 1,700 regional and local corporate members with over 16,000 certified minority business enterprises across the United States of America. As shown by their positive economic impact, these businesses are essential to our local, state, and national economies. Our most recent data shows that NMSDC certified MBEs generate nearly $600 billion in economic output, support more than 2.2 million jobs, and deliver $168 billion in wages to American workers. They are growing faster than the broader economy. This underscores a clear reality. Access to capital for small and minority-owned businesses is more than just a community or local job growth issue. Access to capital for small and minority businesses is a national economic priority. Small and minority business enterprises strengthen domestic supply chains across industries like infrastructure, logistics, construction, and technology. They hire locally, they build regionally, and they scale nationally. But when credit tightens, these small and minority businesses are often the first to be impacted. That disruption does not stop at the small business. It ripples across supply chains. It ripples across local, state, and national economies. As regulators consider modernization under EGRPRA, we urge a clear focus on preserving access to capital. Specifically, we recommend maintaining strong incentives for lending to small and minority-owned businesses, ensuring transparency in small business lending data, and supporting consistent access to working capital. Regulatory modernization should reinforce, not weaken, the financial infrastructure that enables businesses to grow, compete, and contribute at scale.
30
Thank
seconds.
you so much.
Our next speaker is Marissa Caldron.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Marissa Calderon. I'm President and CEO of Prosperity Now. For nearly 5 decades, we've worked with financial institutions and community-based partners to understand how finance systems operate in practice. That perspective allows us to see how reporting requirements, application processes, and examination expectations function across institutions and geographies. Many of the challenges that are often described as reporting burden or process inefficiency are, in our experience, a result of how fragmented the underlying system has become. Data is not consistently defined or shared across institutions, partnership models vary widely, and there's limited standardization in how activities are structured and documented. For example, mortgage lenders today report more than 100 data fields per loan under the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act, while CRA reporting requires separate and differently structured data collection across small business, small farm, and community development activities. These systems are not interoperable, and even federal analysis of CRA performance requires combining multiple data sets to assess outcomes. As a result, institutions and their partners often absorb significant operational costs simply to align and report on activity that is otherwise aligned in intent, with banks experiencing this as a reporting burden, while community partners experience it as friction. More importantly, this fragmentation makes it harder to move capital efficiently and at scale through the very systems CRA relies on. In turn, this contributes unintended variability into how CRA is applied and evaluated, limiting the ability to clearly measure and compare outcomes across institutions and markets. It also makes it more difficult for capital to reach communities in a consistent and scalable manner. We believe there's an opportunity to reduce unnecessary burden while improving clarity and consistency by focusing on greater alignment in data, measurement, and process. This includes how activities are defined, how they're documented, and how information flows between institutions and their community partners.
30 seconds.
Greater alignment and stronger supporting infrastructure would increase efficiency, strengthening the system's ability to deliver on its intended purpose. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Our next speaker is Thaddeus Dawson.
Hi, my name is Thaddeus Dawson. I'm the president and founder of 10KBA and the 10,000 Appraisers Foundation. I have been an appraiser for 40 years.
Next speaker,
my career,
Thaddeus Dawson.
I'm speaking now. I'm public. I'm online.
Yes. I apologize for the interruption. Please go ahead.
My name is Thaddeus Dawson. I've been an appraiser for 40 years. My career predates the Appraisal Foundation, FIREA, and Dodd-Frank. So I've had a frontline seat to watch the 38-year experiment called the Appraisal Foundation. This experiment has been a complete and total failure based on FHFA paper 2407 that states only 10% of all appraisals utilize market conditions adjustments. Well, if only 10% is utilizing market conditions adjustments, that means 90% are not using market conditions adjustments, and therefore the 90% failure. The best way that we can mitigate short-term is the codification of reconsideration of value. That is the most comprehensive wealth preservation plan that we have. That's also a law, and it's implemented by the VA. The VA actually has been doing this since 2003. Secondly, I've also submitted a white paper, and the long-term solution is the land grant reconstruction appraisal program, where we can fix and mitigate all that is wrong with the appraisal profession, although that's going to take some time. My third ask is that we abolish the Appraisal Foundation. It is a complete and total failure. There is no accountability in the appraisal process. And the Appraisal Foundation is not an authorized body to administer discipline. So there is no disciplinary measures or consequence. Thirdly, the new executive order, appraisal modernization through the new executive order in section 2.6 goes a long way to modernizing the appraisal process. We are definitely support that, and we encourage you to support it as well. As what it does is it pushes for a national license, and a national license is a solution. There is nothing uniform about the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. It's covered over 55 jurisdictions across the country with nobody having authority. And the Appraisal Foundation is lobbying against it as an unintended consequence. I think it's an intended consequence and the first step towards modernizing the process. Again, we have submitted a white paper on this very subject to the record, and we look forward to the appraisal modernization process. So we would like for you all to support the appraisal modernization process with the new executive order, as well as codifying reconsideration of value as the #1 consumer protection.
Our next speaker is Tate Hill.
My name is Tate Hill. I serve as the president and CEO of Access Plus Capital, a nonprofit small business lender based in Fresno, serving entrepreneurs across California's Central Valley. I'm here today to urge the Federal Reserve to protect and strengthen the Community Reinvestment Act as a part of the Economic Growth and Regulatory Paperwork Reduction Act review. The CRA remains one of the most effective tools we have to ensure capital reaches communities that traditional finance U.S. too often overlooks, particularly rural, agricultural, low-income regions like Central California. Since 2010, the banks have lent nearly $5 trillion in CRA-qualified mortgages and small business loans throughout the country, including over $717 billion in California. These investments translate directly into home ownership, small business growth, and economic opportunities. But from our vantage point on the ground, what matters most is how CRA works in practice. $8 billion in investments in places like Fresno and Madera County. In rural regions like ours, CRA is the mechanism that makes bank and CDFI partnerships viable. Through these partnerships, Access Plus Capital has deployed over $70 million across 2,000 small businesses in Central California. Importantly, we've directed over $15 million specifically to rural communities, areas where bank branches are sparse and credit gaps widen, while maintaining 96% loan repayment rate. That performance matters. It demonstrates that lending in rural and underserved communities is not only impactful, but is also prudent and sustainable when banks are able to partner with mission-driven intermediaries under the strong CRA framework. As regulators consider opportunities to reduce unnecessary regulatory burden under the Review Act, I urge this principle: streamline documentation and reporting where possible, but do not weaken the underlying CRA expectations that drive these outcomes. In regions like Central California, the CRA is not theoretical. Without it, capital simply does not flow at the scale our community needs. At a time when banking models are evolving and rural communities continue to face structural disinvestment, we need clarity, consistency, and strength in CRA implementation, not retreat. I urge you to maintain the strength of CRA so that banks, CDFIs, and community investment partners continue to deliver the measurable outcomes in places that need it the most. Thank you for this opportunity to comment.
Our next speaker is Kimberly Zito.
Great. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Perfect. My name is Kimberly Zito from Asian Inc. in San Francisco. We're also a member of the Rise Economy Coalition. I want to begin with the story. A few months ago, I met a small business owner in California's Central Valley, a first-generation immigrant who has spent years building a neighborhood grocery store. It wasn't just a store. It was where seniors and community members came for familiar foods, where new immigrants found their footing, and where a community stayed connected. When she first tried to expand her business, she was turned away again and again. Traditional lending channels didn't see her as bankable. It wasn't until a community lender, supported through partnerships incentivized by the Community Reinvestment Act, stepped in, that she was able to access capital. That loan didn't just grow her business. It created jobs, stabilized the neighborhood, and helped a family begin building generational wealth. That's exactly what's at stake. Through the CRA, we've seen what's possible when banks are expected to invest in communities long excluded from the financial mainstream. In California alone, this has driven hundreds of billions of dollars into small businesses, affordable housing, and local economies. CRA lending and investment are profitable for banks and can open new markets to financial institutions. And yet the CRA has been effective in encouraging banks to do more in underserved neighborhoods than they might otherwise. It creates real pathways for families to access capital, build wealth, and achieve financial stability. These benefits come at minimal cost to banks, making efforts to weaken CRA obligations both unjustified and harmful, especially for rural and low-income communities. At a time when public funding for community development is declining, the CRA is more critical than ever in mobilizing private capital to meet community needs. Yet we are seeing a rapid push toward deregulation that risks undoing this progress. Accountability measures like public input are being weakened, while fair housing oversight and data transparency are being rolled back. This is not justified burden reduction, but a move that undermines the purpose and proven impact of these laws. The consequences are real, from reduced access to capital for small businesses to increased displacement and communities pushed further into the margins. Regulatory reform must remain grounded in protecting consumers, ensuring fair access, and maintaining a safe and sound financial system by strengthening the CRA. Preserving community voice and recognizing that the cost of deregulation is borne by those least able to absorb it. The decisions made now will determine whether opportunity expands or contracts. We urge you to uphold the intent of these statutes and center the communities they were designed to serve. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Peter Hanley.
Good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity to present today. My name is Peter Hanley. I'm Executive Director of CASA of Oregon. CASA works throughout the state of Oregon, mostly in rural areas, to serve the needs of farm workers, veterans, immigrants, and other low and moderate income populations. We do this through a number of programs, through our manufactured housing co-op development program, where we convert mobile home parks to resident ownership. We also build housing for farm workers and other rural populations. We run a IDA program, individual development account program, that has resulted in about $316 million in purchased assets, with 5,000 savers in that program. And that program benefits first-time home buyers, entrepreneurs, as well as those wishing a college education. And we do all this work with a $20 million CDFI. Now, each and every one of these programs relies on banks to assist our work. Our IDA program requires banks to not only work with us on the accounts where people save their money, but also when they eventually buy their asset in getting a mortgage or getting a business loan. On the CDFI side, a number of our loans are made in conjunction with other CDFIs, and so investments within our CDFI wouldn't have made our work possible. We've been doing this for 38 years, and we look at CRA as the nudge to get banks what they should be doing anyway, because it's good business, but they're doing it because there's an affirmative obligation to do it, and it should continue to be an affirmative obligation for them. It brings widespread economic benefits at a minimal compliance to the banks. A study of the Federal Reserve of St. Louis showed that less than 1% of interest expense. Now, in Oregon, since 2010, we've had about $819 million in CRA investments throughout the state. We believe that continued CRA investments are in the best interest of the communities that we serve, and we encourage that any regulation to limit those CRA investments should not be stopped, should not be put into place, and we would ask that you stop the repeal of the 2023 CRA regs. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Will Gonzalez.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Will Gonzalez. I am the Executive Director of SEBA, a coalition building organization in Philadelphia. CRA is a tool for economic mobility. It is a mutually beneficial tool with minimal compliant costs for banks. Without CRA, there are less opportunities for homeownership and entrepreneurship. I'll give you a story. Isaiah was growing up. His parents were able to move into a home that was developed with the help of CRA. With a stable home, he was able to do well in school. His parents also seized the opportunity to improve their workforce capacity. And now all of them, the whole household, is no longer low to moderate income. So that is income mobility. We are supposed to not spend more than 35% of our income on housing. Who does? Especially when it comes to lower income folks, they spend much more, 60, 70%. So affordable housing is really important to our community, and it is really good business for banks, because what you're doing is you're nurturing future customers, people who will get higher mortgages, people who will put more money in the bank, people who will start businesses. So it's very important that CRA continue to be a mutual beneficial tool for the community and for the financial institutions. Since 2010, banks have lent nearly $5 trillion in CRA qualified mortgages and small business loans throughout the country, including $173 billion in Pennsylvania and $96 billion in Philadelphia. The CRA increases the supply of affordable rental housing by driving investment and LIHTC, low-income housing tax credits. Banks account for about 85% of LIHTC investment. And with the changes that are coming at the federal level with increases in LIHTC, that tool will be further used by financial institutions. So we want to encourage that. Over the last 40 years, affordable housing activities of the SEBA Collective have built, thanks to CRA, 1,496 units of homeownership and rental, have repaired or preserved 10,270 units, and our partner CDFI has financed the construction of over 1,000 units. CRA protects the position of our community. It is good neighbor policy. It is a strong catalyst for meeting the housing supply challenges that we're confronting in this country, and it is an amazing tool to boost economic mobility for the benefit of our economy. Please stop the planned repeal of the 2023 CRA regulations, as these updates made the CRA more relevant to modern banking and will likely result in even greater economic benefits. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you.
Our next speaker is DeMario Green.
Hello, my name is DeMario Green, and I'm the Policy and Government Relations Director for the Chicago Community Loan Fund. On behalf of CCLF, I'd like to thank the Federal Reserve for holding this hearing regarding the Community Reinvestment Act as part of the AGRIPA process. We are a 35-year-old community development financial institution serving the Chicagoland by financing the development of affordable housing, community facilities, commercial real estate, and social enterprise. In that time, we've closed nearly 700 loans, created or retained over 13,100 affordable housing units, and nearly 8,100 jobs. This impact is underpinned by our ability to attract public and private sector community revitalization capital that we've been able to leverage, thanks in large part to CRA. This law serves as a critical incentive for traditional banks to partner with community lenders who have the trust of underserved individuals in the hardest to reach geographies and the expertise to create wealth building opportunities in neighborhoods historically considered high risk. CRA plays a pivotal role in spurring New Markets Tax Credit Program investment. CCLF has been fortunate to utilize this program both as a direct recipient and a bank partner. Our 2015 $15 million allocation empowered 3 historically underserved communities by increasing affordable housing options, expanding access to healthcare services, and bolstering educational opportunities for teens. As a partner, we helped create the North Austin Community Center Sports and Education Complex, serving over 25,000 neighborhood youth and families, and the Excess Tennis Center, the first tennis center on the South Side of Chicago, and the second in the nation founded and operated by an African American. Beyond being sound and fruitful financial investment, these inspirational developments catalyze community transformation. Highlighted by the American Bankers Association, CDFIs are an essential part of the American financial ecosystem as we ensure that all communities, urban and rural, large and small, have access to the capital necessary to participate and contribute to our national economy. Updating the CRA to promote CDFI collaboration amongst eligible activities, adjust to the modern banking landscape, and collect data comprehensively will remove several outdated regulatory barriers that are blocking many Americans from accessing vital wealth-building opportunities that align with this administration's economic vision. We urge regulators to look at their widely supported 2023 rulemaking as they work jointly to ensure that regulated entities continue to have dependable, unified rules to follow, offering both market stability and a fertile environment for community-focused collaboration. Let's work cooperatively to achieve these goals and restore the greatness of underserved American neighborhoods. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Linda Izuka.
My name is Linda Izuka, founder of CRA Today and the CRA Hub. I have over 32 years of banking, leading a large bank CRA program, serving on various nonprofit boards, and partnering with CDFIs throughout my career. I do not speak for the communities for which this law was designed to serve. I speak with the urgency of someone who has seen what happens when this regulation is applied well and when it is not. My first priority is exam transparency. Within the CRA Hub, we work with banks of various sizes across multiple agencies and exam cycles. I witness a consistent problem. Here's the scenario. 2 similarly situated banks receiving materially different feedback with no written record of what was denied qualification despite multiple requests. I recommend that the regulators issue a written summary of activities not approved along with the bank's PE and implement it on an interagency basis. This could be a private, non-public communication to reduce regulatory burden. This paired with a published illustrated list of approved activities, banks would have the clarity to manage risk and build build stronger CRA programs. My second point is financial literacy. Financial illiteracy costs Americans over $1 trillion over the past 4 years. Not one community, not one income bracket, every community, every family. Banks have a strong history of serving their entire community. I urge the agencies to extend service credit that benefit all, because strong communities are built on financial knowledge, not just financial access. My third point is CDFI and bank partnerships. CDFIs exist to deploy capital where banks cannot always go alone. They are federally certified, they are mission verified, and yet investments in CDFIs face geographic restrictions that investments in MDIs do not. This restriction applied to CDFI is perhaps an oversight and a 1995 artifact. I urge the agencies to extend CRA credit to activities consistent with the treatment already afforded to MDIs, women depository institution, and low-income credit unions. I'll close with this. Clarity, consistency, and transparency will strengthen both CRA performance and CRA impact. This is what this regulation was built for. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Matthew Lee.
Sure. Thanks a lot. Thanks for this opportunity. On behalf of Fair Finance Watch and Intercity Press, I want to make part of the record in this paperwork reduction process the degree to which the Federal Reserve's merger reviews and refusal to review some mergers is increasingly excluding the public and undermining not only the Community Reinvestment Act, but also antitrust and even anti-money laundering principles. It's often said, particularly by the Federal Reserve, that the Federal Reserve is independent. But soon after the FDIC in late 2025 moved to stop providing public notice of branch applications, even though the CRA statute explicitly says that CRA performance is to be considered on applications for deposit facilities, the Federal Reserve began to follow suit. The board, through its reserve banks, which are owned by banks, told Fair Finance Watch that the issue of reduced public access was not an issue that the Fed would consider. Then when consumer complaints, some of bank fraud, are raised, including comments made to the CFPB, the board has said that these are not substantive and they won't be considered. No matter how bad the complaint, no matter how pervasive the practice, these determinations are designed to allow the Federal Reserve to confine some applications to the reserve banks, which have no authority to deny applications and can only approve them. The Fed did this recently on a UBS/Credit Suisse application, rubber stamping it at the reserve bank level, despite not only money laundering issues, but also issues still being reviewed in congressional committees. It gets worse. In late 2025, the Fed allowed an $8 billion bank acquisition by a bank holding company to take place with no Federal Reserve application at all. Just this month, when Fair Finance Watch commented in advance urging the Fed not to waive the application requirement for an acquisition by stockyard banks, the Secretary wrote back and denied it. It only went to the Secretary because Stockyard Bank's CEO is on the board of a reserve bank. So we did a FOIA request because in light of the Silicon Valley Bank having been on the board of the San Francisco Fed when it failed, and we were told that there are no records of safeguards of these conflicts of interest. To me, it's not credible. And today we received a response to a November 2025 FOIA request, received today with no explanation of the 4-month delay. This also takes place on branch closing plans and branch mergers. On Fifth Third Comerica, they were released. In other ones, they're not released. There's no explanation of the lack of consistency. I could obviously say more. I'm trying to bring it in at time. In conclusion, I urge the Federal Reserve to reverse its descent into underregulation, willful blindness, and regulatory capture to avoid a repeat of the 2008 predatory lending meltdown. You will be hearing more from us. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Joan Broadhead.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me today. My name is Joan Broadhead, and I'm the Chief Strategic Initiatives Officer at Finanta. Since 1998, Finanta has been a federally certified community development financial institution, and we now manage over $250 million in assets. For over 3 decades, we've provided financing to some of the lowest income communities in America, including the city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We're deeply rooted in these communities, and we're focused on providing small business loans, community revitalization financing, and the critical development of affordable housing. It should be noted that the CRA increases the supply of affordable rental housing by driving investment in low-income housing tax credits, with banks accounting for 85% of LIHTC dollars. Another example is our partnering with our New Markets Tax Credit Program. In Philadelphia last year, we had worked with our longtime partner, PNC Bank, to finance a $30 million expansion of print ply manufacturing, which resulted in the increase of 50 jobs per year, and after 7 years will be over 350 new jobs, all earning living wage and health benefits. Similar to most CDFIs, we have significant investments in dozens of banks, predominantly funding that they provide to us in the form of debt issued to us for lending in our market. These banks include community banks, regional and national banks as well. An important aspect of these investments is the requirement that Finanta maintain its uninterrupted federal certification from the U.S. Treasury CDFI Fund. As you can see, bank investments are essential to our ability to access capital, provide access to capital in low-income communities. Our concern is that the staff layoffs at the CDFI Fund last fall have delayed the processing of hundreds of applications pending certification. We recommend that the agencies provide clear guidance to banks so that CDFIs can continue to receive consideration for financing despite the delays in CDFI certification processing. Again, we're very happy to have been here today, and thank you for the opportunity to provide comments.
Our next speaker is Sheila Collins. Sheila Collins. Let me suggest that we go on, and in that case, our next speaker will be Irvin Henderson.
Good afternoon. I am Irvin Henderson, President and CEO of Henderson & Company, a national developer of underserved communities throughout the country. I am a founding board member, former chair, and current vice chair of the National Community Reinvestment Coalition. I am also board member emeritus of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, chair emeritus of the National Trust Community Investment Corporation, founder and chair of Gateway Community Development Corporation in Henderson, North Carolina, and audit chair and trustee of Community Capital Trust, a $4 billion mutual fund dedicated to only CRA investments. My comments come from the perspective of someone who has been developing housing, commercial revitalization, and enterprise development in underserved communities, benefiting underserved families and individuals for 40 years. Without the CRA, these communities and families would have little or no investment over the last 30-plus years. Areas where the New Market Tax Credit and the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit provide opportunity would not exist, because without the CRA, banks would not invest in the tax credit arena. Historic tax credit investment in emerging and underserved neighborhoods, which often are the core of our great cities and the rural areas that touch Appalachia, the historic South, and Indian country, would be greatly diminished. Renewable energy investment would shrink considerably. It is through these 4 tax credits and other bank investment satisfying the investment test that new investment capital has come to these needy communities. It is through these instruments that our federal government has supported reinvestment in poor communities, rural and urban. The 2023 rules supported these investments through direct investment and through national funds, such as the Community Impact Fund. It broadened and modernized the approaches to monitoring and crediting investment of the banking institutions outside of the traditional branch network. It can be said that the most efficient flow of private capital comes through these conduits. The compliance cost is acceptable, but a de-emphasis through the retrenchment to the previous rule does not consider the modernization of banking choices, activities, and growth. Small businesses throughout the country are receiving access to credit and capital, which feeds the lifeblood of our future innovation and market responsiveness as a country.
30 seconds.
All our large tech entities were originally small businesses. Many small business owners cannot depend upon friends and family for early stage capital, but bank small business lending and support of the CDFI lending is available to them because there is a CRA. These investments and loan products support the future of our country and are important to all Americans, not just those of need. It is simply the base and essence of free enterprise and must be maintained. Thank you, and thanks to the Federal Reserve for this forum.
Our next speaker is Emily Haber.
Hi, good evening. My name is Emily Haber, and I'm the President and CEO of the Massachusetts Association of Community Development Corporations. Thank you for the opportunity to share comments at this hearing. MACDC serves as the capacity building and advocacy arm of the community development movement in Massachusetts. We are an association of over 100 mission-driven community development organizations dedicated to creating places of opportunity where all people can live with dignity while participating in and benefiting from our Commonwealth's economy. Collectively, our CDC members achieved significant results. In 2024, our members created or preserved 1,095 homes, created or preserved 4,563 jobs, assisted over 2,000 entrepreneurs, provided a wide range of services and housing to 86,689 families, and generated $1.36 billion of investment into local communities. MACDC is a huge proponent of the Community Reinvestment Act. Our members partner with banks in all aspects of their work. Banks provide critical philanthropic dollars to our nonprofit CDCs. They provide the loans and investments for the critically needed affordable housing development in the Commonwealth, as well as loans to small businesses that are the economic engine in many of our neighborhoods. Governor Healy has challenged the housing development ecosystem to build 222,000 units of housing by 2035 to address our critical housing shortage. Bank participation is essential to meeting that need. For example, in 2024, Eastern Bank provided financing and/or purchased low-income housing tax credits for 5 CDC projects that are providing 186 much-needed units of affordable housing. And in fact, across the nation, CRA increases the supply of affordable rental housing by driving investment in LIHTC, with banks accounting for 85% of LIHTC investment dollars. Many CDCs also support their communities by providing technical assistance to small businesses that help them grow and ultimately access capital through the banking system. Since 2010, banks have lent nearly $5 trillion in CRA qualified mortgages and small business loans throughout the country, including over $168 billion in Massachusetts. Without CRA, there are fewer opportunities for home ownership and entrepreneurship. Studies conducted by the Federal Reserve of Philadelphia found that banks decrease their home purchase lending by 10% in census tracts that lose eligibility for CRA qualified loans. Small business lending also declines by nearly 10% in urban census tracts. The Federal Reserve should stop their planned repeal of the 2023 CRA regulations, as these updates made the CRA more relevant to modern banking and would likely result in even greater economic benefits. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Layla Amerhamzen.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to provide public comments today. Again, my name is Layla Amerhamzen. I'm the Director of Community Reinvestment for New Jersey Citizen Action, a statewide community and coalition-based nonprofit organization that works to empower, organize, and mobilize communities through issue advocacy, education, and the provision of free direct services in an effort to eliminate social, racial, and economic inequities so that all New Jerseyans have opportunities to thrive and prosper. On behalf of the thousands of New Jerseyans empowered through our issue advocacy and free direct services each year, we appreciate the opportunity to comment today on the legacy of CRA regulations as part of the Agrippa process. Since its passage in 1977, The Community Reinvestment Act has resulted in significant economic growth, opportunities, and overall benefits to communities, including New Jersey communities, with minimal compliance costs for banks, including those with less than $10 billion in assets. These economic opportunities include ensuring that our communities, including low and moderate income communities and communities of color, have access to home ownership and entrepreneurship opportunities. CRA has also driven investment in affordable housing and investments in community development, financial institutions, and economic and community development in general. Since 2010, banks have lent nearly $5 trillion in CRA-qualified mortgages and small business loans throughout the country, including $138 billion right here in New Jersey. Without CRA, there would be significantly less opportunities for homeownership and entrepreneurship. In fact, studies conducted by the Federal Reserve of Philadelphia have shown that when census tracts lose eligibility for CRA-qualified lending, banks decreased their home purchase lending by 10% in those neighborhoods, and small business lending also declined by nearly 10% in urban census tracts. With regard to affordable housing, the federal CRA increases the supply of affordable rental housing by driving investment in low-income housing tax credits, or LIHTC, with banks accounting for 85% of LIHTC investment dollars. As a state that is currently facing a severe affordable housing shortage of nearly 300,000 affordable rental homes, and the seventh highest housing wage, according to the National Low-Income Housing Coalition's Out of Reach report.
30 seconds.
The importance of CRA cannot be understated. The overwhelming success of CRA is that it is able to generate this investment in our communities, all of while its compliant costs make up less than 1% of non-interest expenses. We urge federal regulators to stop their planned repeal of 2023 CRA regulations, as these updates made CRA more relevant to modern banking, which has clearly changed dramatically since the law's passage and would likely result in even greater economic benefits to our underserved communities. Thank you so very much.
Our next speaker, let's try Sheila Collins.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please proceed.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Sheila Collins, founder of Girlfriends Who Inspire Change, a global women empowerment network focused on economic mobility, financial literacy, and wealth building opportunities for underserved communities. I am here today to speak on the impact of the Community Reinvestment Act and how its implementations can better serve low and moderate income individuals, particularly women working to stabilize and elevate their financial futures. At GWIC, we work directly with women navigating financial hardship while striving to build sustainable income and generational wealth. What we are consistently seeing is a system that provides access to credit but not protection and pathways forward. For example, institutions such as Bank of America offer small dollar loan products intended to provide short-term relief. However, when a borrower, such as a single mother working a low-wage job, experiences even minor delays in repayment, the consequences can be long-term, even when the loan is paid in full. Negative credit reporting can significantly damage her ability to secure future housing, business funding, and financial stability. That is not empowerment. That is a cycle. The issue is not access, it is outcome. Under the CRA, success should not be measured solely by the number of loans distributed, but by whether those loans actually improve economic mobility. At GWIC, we believe CRA policies must evolve to include credit building protections for small dollar loans, alternative reporting structures that do not penalize short-term hardship, and a strong focus on measurable pathways out of poverty, including support for entrepreneurship. If we are serious about equity, we must move from transactional banking to transformational impact. The CRA was designed to reinvest in communities. Now is the time to ensure that investment truly builds, not breaks, the financial futures of people it's meant to serve. Thank you.
The next speaker is Susie Hahn.
Hi,
Hi, thank you to the Federal Reserve Board for hosting this outreach session and the opportunity to speak on the CRA. I'm Susie Hahn, VP of Regulatory Affairs at Opportunity Finance Network, OFN. We're the nation's leading network and intermediary representing more than 500 community development finance institutions, CDFIs, and manage over $1 billion in total assets as a CDFI ourselves. OFN members are vital CRA stakeholders. Our members, thanks to CRA-motivated capital, often work in credit deserts in rural, urban, and Native communities across the United States to correct market failures. Since our founding in 1986, our members have originated $111 billion in financing, creating or maintaining more than 3 million jobs, supporting 850,000 small businesses, 2.4 million housing units, and 14,000 community facility projects. Within our own membership network, we found that 46% of CDFI's capital stack came from banks, totaling $6.17 billion in FY24. This is a significant demonstration of partnership that shows how closely CRA-motivated banks work together with CDFIs to drive private dollars into the most hard-to-reach places. Without CRA incentives, many communities will continue to be excluded from fair access to credit and investment. Projects that serve low and moderate income communities often leverage low-income housing tax credit and new markets tax credit. It is estimated that over 80% of annual LIHTC and NMTC equity investments come from CRA-motivated banks. Under the legacy CRA framework that is currently in place, we share the regulator's objective of sharpening this important tool by reducing inefficiencies. But the regulator's recent changes overweigh the compliance burden for banks, while undervaluing the lost opportunities for investment into LMI communities. The OCC's strategic plan simplification could weaken CRA impact without clear benchmarks and rigorous minimum standards, encouraging investment in easier geographies while bypassing rural and deeply distressed areas that the CRA is meant to serve. The FDIC has also reduced CRA exam cycles to 5 to 6 years and replaced full exams with mid-cycle risk reviews for nearly all banks, weakening sustained focus on community development. On the other hand, explicit interpretive guidance could improve transparency and streamline processes. For
30
example,
seconds.
Publishing an illustrative list of qualifying CRA activities, clarifying broader statewide or regional area, giving equal treatment to CDFI loans and investments, and differentiating high-impact activities with greater weight can reduce subjective variability that would be well appreciated by CDFIs and bank partners. We also urge the regulators to work jointly so that any new guidance is implemented uniformly across the three regulators to avoid fragmenting a fair framework for all examinees. Another timely concern is around CDFI certifications. We ask that the regulators consider providing more clarity for CDFIs who are undergoing the certification process, and interagency guidance on how banks can continue to receive CRA credit for financing CDFIs despite delays in certification decisions would be welcomed by all parties. Thank you for all the regulators' continued efforts to consider the diverse set of perspectives and a holistic cost-benefit approach that fully acknowledges the CRA's impact in low-income and underserved communities.
Our next speaker is Sugita Karada.
Thank you, Federal Reserve. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My story begins long before this room, in another country, another financial system, where I first learned how innovation and regulations dance with each other. When I came to the United States on an H-1B visa, I carried with me not just technical skills, but a habit of observing how systems evolve and where they quietly fall behind the world they are meant to govern. Working across banks, fintechs, and third-party providers, I started to notice a pattern. It felt as if the industry was living in two timelines at once. The present, where technology moves at the speed of thought, and the past, where some of our frameworks still echo the economics of decades ago. I would sit in meetings where teams wrestled with thresholds set in another era, or where smaller institutions were navigating structures built for giants. No one complained, but you could feel the friction like a violin silently, not in tune. I remember once, Project Vividly, we were operating to launch a digital onboarding tool. The idea was bold. the technology elegant, but the path forward felt heavier than it needed to be. Instead of pushing ahead blindly, we carved out a small pilot, a safe space to learn. The pilot revealed insights we would have never seen at the full scale. It taught me that innovation doesn't need to be reckless to be fast. It just needs room to breathe. I have seen similar moments with third-party partnerships, cloud providers, fintech collaborators, regulatory service vendors. They are now part of the bloodstream of modern finance. But the visibility into those relationships often lags behind their importance. It's like driving a modern car with an old map. You can move, but not with full confidence. And then there's the human side. I have watched brilliant teams spend weeks producing documentation that no one truly needed, simply because expectations felt uncertain. It
30
reminded
seconds.
me of people building walls for protection when what they really needed was a clear path forward. All of these experiences shaped the vision I carry with me today. A regulatory environment that moves in harmony with the economy it serves. One where clarity replaces hesitation, where oversight matches actual complexity, where innovation is guided rather than restrained, and where collaboration across banks, non-banks, and regulators becomes the norm rather than the exception. If we can align our framework with the realities of today's financial ecosystem, we can build a system that is both resilient and imaginative, one that protects consumers, supports competition, and gives institutions the confidence to innovate responsibly. Thank you again for the opportunity to share my story and my perspective. Thank you, Federal Reserve.
And our final, I believe, speaker is Erica Plasencia.
Hello, my name is Erika Plasencia, and I'm the Senior Program Manager for Economic Equity at the Green Lining Institute, based in Oakland, California. Thank you for the opportunity to provide public comments on the Legacy Community Reinvestment Act regulations as part of the IGRIPA review process. At Green Lining, we work towards a future where communities of color can build wealth, live in healthy places filled with economic opportunity, and are ready to meet the challenges posed by climate change. We proactively drive investments and opportunities into communities of color alongside a coalition of over 40 grassroots, community-based organizations, including minority business associations, community development corporations, and civil rights organizations. In my role, I serve as a bridge between communities and financial institutions, ensuring that public processes center the needs of low-income communities and communities of color. The CRA has been instrumental in that work. It has helped us successfully advocate and negotiate initiatives directing more than $800 billion in corporate and public investments into communities of color in California and across the nation. These are not abstract benefits. They are investments in housing, small businesses, and community infrastructure that strengthen our broader economy. This is why the proposed rollback of the 2023 CRA rule is so concerning. These updates made the CRA more relevant to modern banking by recognizing how financial services are delivered today. They expanded and clarified community development activities, including critical investments in climate resilience, and such as renewable energy, flood mitigation, and resilient infrastructure. This is essential as the same communities historically impacted by redlining continue to face disproportionate economic, health, and climate risks. At the same time, we are seeing increased consolidation across the banking industry. As mergers accelerate, CRA obligations are effectively weakened. Public engagement is reduced, accountability diminishes, and communities are often left worse off. Since 2021, 1 in 5 bank branches have closed, with a disproportionate share of closures occurring in LMI communities and communities of color. These closures reduce access to safe, affordable financial services and eliminate local jobs, further destabilizing already underserved areas. Mergers should leave communities better off, but too often they do not. This is why robust CRA enforcement, meaningful public participation, and tools like community benefit agreements are essential to ensure institutions truly meet the convenience and needs of communities they serve.
30 seconds.
Reliable access to banking is not optional. It is foundational to economic mobility and wealth building. When communities are excluded from credit and investment, they are pushed toward predatory financial services, deepening wealth disparities and increasing economic vulnerability. This does not just harm those communities, it weakens the resilience and stability of our entire financial system. Moreover, maintaining a strong CRA is not in conflict with economic growth. It is foundational to it. Broad-based access to credit fuels entrepreneurship, stabilizes housing markets, and builds local economies. Weakening CRA does not reduce burden. It shifts risk and costs onto the very communities that can least afford it. Instead, the agencies should reverse their plans to repeal the 2023 CRA rule that implemented several needed updates, clarify how banks can receive consideration for community development in communities with minimal branch networks, and continue to receive credit for financing CDFIs. Thank you for your time and consideration today. Have a great one.
Thank you all. So this concludes our fourth and final outreach for this AGRIPA regulatory framework review. There are two groups that I certainly want to signal out and thank. First, an event like this doesn't happen without meaningful staff support, and this event went very smoothly, and we're very grateful for everybody who helped make it happen, so thank you. And then even more importantly, I want to thank all the participants, particularly those that provided public comments today. Thank you for your commitment of time. Thankful for your thoughtfulness. Thank you for the energy that you put into those comments. We are truly grateful. Public comment collected today and in similar outreach events and through other public comment processes are essential for the regulatory agencies to consider as they attempt to improve our framework. Please be assured that your feedback will be considered as we move forward in the AGRIPA process. And again, thank you all.
on about the Fed.
Across the United States, the Federal Reserve, through its Federal Reserve Education Program, helps people understand how the economy works so consumers have the tools to make sound financial decisions. Through this education program, teachers have access to classroom-ready online resources for students from kindergarten to college, videos, classroom lessons, online education, publications, and more. These resources are all free for educators to use in their lesson plans, or as they see fit. Many of the Federal Reserve System's regional reserve banks, located in 12 districts across the nation, also offer in-person and online professional development that allows educators to deepen their knowledge and hone their craft when it comes to economics, personal finance, and more. At the board and reserve banks, students also get hands-on opportunities like internships and participation on student boards, which introduce them to key economics concepts and potential careers in economics and finance. Consumers are empowered to make sound financial decisions through the availability of easy-to-understand resources that explain personal finance concepts, the broader economy, and the Federal Reserve's role in it. Federal Reserve Education is committed to equipping educators, educating students, and empowering consumers when it comes to understanding and participating in our evolving economy. For more information, visit federalreserveeducation.org to find links to resources and Reserve Bank programs offered near you.
Estamos bien, pero hay que invertir para asegurar el futuro de nuestra gente. Tú eres la CEO, hermanita. Tú decides.
Lo hacemos. Hay razones que mueven más que el dinero. Las personas.
Por eso en Ibercaja reinvertimos el 100% de nuestros beneficios en la sociedad. Ibercaja, 150 años moviéndonos por ti.